60s, 70s, you got all those very bold musicians and experimenters working with all kinds of machines and materials, and they were searching for a new world, new ways of hearing, new ways of making music, new societies. Well, in my teens, I was studying piano and aiming to be a harpsichordist, an organist. I was just in love with Baroque music. At a certain point, a music student, a friend of mine, introduced me to Wendy Carlos' Switched on Bach, the 1968 album, and I was completely impressed by that. I suddenly realized that the synthesizer could be used like an organ, making all sorts of sounds. I started researching about those equipments, and I was in love by the universe I found. At a certain point, I started acquiring old synthesizers, old lab equipment. I had this room packed with synthesizers, electric pianos, lab equipment and whatnot. I wanted all of them to be hooked up, synced and playing together like this massive pipe organ of the utopias, of this massive instrument. And this is what came to be the Wendy Carlos room.
I had a long history in this studio, which started early 2000 when I first started working with this band Skank here in VH. So later on, the band decided to end the studio as a commercial studio, and they were starting to spread the word around about selling the place. At that moment, I had the honor to meet this young man who I visited in his house to discuss about the possibility of creating a new studio. He wanted to record both orchestra sounds, pianos, and organs, and like a small quartet, also chamber music. And we also have to think about all the other stuff, all the other styles of music that are happening today. So that's how we came up with the idea of creating variable acoustics in this space. So because there was this need of having a space that could have multiple use for all kinds of music, we also had to incorporate quite a lot of interesting materials, such as recycled wood, which we see all across the floor, except for a small part of this floor that received a granite floor, which is extremely reflective, so that it could add even more reverberation to the space. On the side walls, we have these giant bricks. They are all handmade, and they have this kind of porous quality to them. And the way they were placed on the wall in a kind of a zigzag move, and we have different positions and angles, so that they also work as a mid-range diffuser, which is quite useful for this kind of space. And the fact that we have a lot of wood, bricks and stones, it gives this very unique characteristic to this room.
We have this large room named after Carlos Alberto Pinto Fonseca, who was my uncle, conductor of the state's symphonic orchestra and creator of one of the greatest choirs Brazil ever had. Well, and this piano is a very interesting piece. It is actually a concert grand, a Steinway Model D from 1914, which was completely restored and rebuilt for this studio with unique parts.
Quando eu fui convidado para esse projeto, o objetivo que a gente concluiu ser o nosso objetivo comum era de transformar um punhado de equipamentos e máquinas diferentes, de diferentes épocas, combinar, fazer com que eles conversassem e transformar isso num instrumento, né, único, assim, potente, né? Essa era a ideia principal. E esse instrumento, esse conjunto de aparatos, né, que se tornou a nossa sala de controle, a gente deu o nome de sala Connie Plank. Aqui na nossa técnica, a gente pode criar e recriar fluxos de trabalho diversos. A gente tem a possibilidade de manter um fluxo totalmente analógico e também criar fluxos híbridos e mesmo alguns processos experimentais, assim. Pode gravar com equipamentos mais antigos, fazer mixagens em equipamentos e mixers mais antigos, né? Mas a gente tem aqui a honra de ter um equipamento potente que é a nossa console de mixagem da UTA, que é um console totalmente analógico, mas que tem recursos. Parece que eles foram lá na década de 70, se inspiraram nos consoles da época, mas ele tem recursos que não existiam nesse período. A gente pode criar sons acústicos, gravar e manipular. A gente pode sintetizar sons, combinar esses sons acústicos gravados e manipulados com sons sintetizados. A gente tem aparatos eletrônicos, elétricos, alguns deles inusitados, alguns deles um pouco incomuns. Então, por que não um acervo de instrumentos completamente único no mundo?
In the late 70s, while Connie Plank and Wendy Carlos were researching in their own new ways of making and seeing music, we were lucky enough to have here in Brazil a man called Marco Antônio Guimarães, who started researching new ways of making music, be it in the field of musical composition and education, or by means of the creation of new acoustic and electroacoustic musical instruments. Those instruments were then adopted and researched by a group he devised called Wakichi, which would play his compositions in their own arrangements and compositions all around the globe with internationally renowned artists like Milton Nascimento and Philip Glass.
Ele criou o grupo Wakichi nos anos 70 e o grupo é um grupo referência na música instrumental brasileira e fora do Brasil também, exatamente por trabalhar com novos instrumentos, né? Buscando uma abordagem que é orgânica mesmo, entre a prática musical, as ideias e esses materiais, que são os instrumentos. O grupo teve bastante ativo por quase 40 anos, encerrou suas atividades em 2015 e, por sorte, um privilégio, esse estúdio tem uma sala com o nome Marco Antônio Guimarães e dentro dessa sala estão todos os instrumentos que o Marco inventou ao longo dessa trajetória. Então não é um ou outro instrumento que ele criou, senão todo o acervo do Marco Antônio Guimarães aqui disponível em plenas condições de ser utilizado, de soar e de fazer música.
part of the concept of this design was that there was always this intention to keep the vibe and the original shape and look of the old house. This used to be a house of the drummer's family, the drummer of this band Skank that used to own the studio. And there was this TV room for the house that became a guitar room, and it was named after this band Skank. And now is one of the various spaces for recording in this facility. For me as a designer, it was awesome that I had the opportunity to not only be part of the initial process, which is, to create the space with my colleagues in the company, but also to do the tuning of the audio system, which is basically adjusting, making final little adjustments of the system to make it sound as good as it can inside of that acoustical space. And also measure the room, measure all the studio characteristics so we can explain that to the clients and how they can use it to their best.
Apesar de a gente ter aqui diversas salas separadas, elas funcionam em conjunto para ter a possibilidade de modelar o som da maneira como cada um quer, criar formas, cores diferentes com o som, experimentar, que é o principal. Então quem vier aqui tem condição de inventar a sua própria maneira de produzir sons.
Welcome to New Doors Vintage Keys.